Hey guys, Paul Reddick here, and welcome to 90mphMechanics. This is the course where we're going to show you how you can copy the mechanics of baseball's hardest and most successful throwers. So anytime we talk about mechanics, there's two things that come into the conversation. And one is a lot of conventional wisdom, a lot of subjective information. And that's kind of the stuff you hear where, you hear a lot of coaches will yell stuff out at practices and games. It all kind of sounds good, but it's not really part of a whole plan. It really doesn't make sense if you ever put it all together. So conventional wisdom is a big problem, and subjective information, opinion, is a big problem when we have a discussion about pitching mechanics, because what we tend to focus on here is objective information, research information, stuff that we can prove. And we have our research facility called Pitching DNA, where we do independent research, and a lot of it has been spent in this area of pitching mechanics. So what we're going to present to you during this presentation is not only we're going to show you the objective researched information about what the best pitchers in baseball do, and I think you're going to be really surprised at the similarities of the most successful pitchers in baseball. But we're also going to show you the pitchers that have come up maybe in the last decade or so that really seem to have all the physical talent that the most successful pitchers had, but didn't quite live up to their potential. And when you see the commonalities amongst those pitchers, I think you're really going to be shocked. So everything we show you today is objective information. It's not our opinion. It's what we've researched and we've proven to be accurate in how the best players, the best pitchers in baseball throw the ball the hardest. So as we get into it, I always frame the discussion with this. What is your arm worth to you? Even if it's just staying injury-free and having a healthy, productive life, is functioning, anatomy, what's it worth to you? Is it worth $1 million, $500,000, $250,000? I think at the very lowest level, just basic health, our arm is worth a lot of money to us, right? So let's say it was worth $1 million, okay? Now, I always like to play this little game with parents and coaches and players. And I say, look, let's say I gave you $1 million in cash, okay? But there was one catch to it. I'm giving you all this money, but you have to invest that money in a business. And not only that, but you have to invest it in a business long term. You can't take the money out until 30 years from now, right? So how would you invest your money? Would you invest it in a great company that's got a proven track record, that always makes profits, always successful, that's stable? Would you invest it, or would you gamble that with a new company, like a tech company or something that's got a good idea that maybe has a few good years? Well, I think if I were your financial advisor, I would very, very strongly advise you to invest that money with a long-term, stable company with a proven track record, right? Because we don't want to lose that money. If somebody gave us $1 million, right? We don't want to lose that money. We want that money to be there 30 years from now and hopefully multiply and be more successful. Well, this is what happens when we have a model of pitching. And one of the things that has been kind of the most frustrating part for me as a pitching instructor, and particularly with our position kind of in the pitching world as the leading publisher, every time a new pitcher comes on the scene that's got a different set of mechanics or something unique, we get inundated with people who want to copy that. So I've been through the Dontrelle Willis, the Mark Pryor, we were through the Hideo Nomo, Daisuke, Tim Lincecum, and every time a new pitcher comes through, El Duque was another one. We have pitchers that go out there and try to mimic that and want to copy that because they think the secret is in this uniqueness. So, I mean, if you look at, the Dontrelle Willis and Mark Pryor and Daisuke and Lincecum, they were 10 years ago, 5 or even maybe a little less, they were the best pitchers in baseball. Now today, those guys should still be in the primes of their career. And Lincecum's basically a 500 pitcher the last couple of years, really struggling. Nomo is out of the game. Daisuke is just struggling to stay on. Only 5 years ago. Pryor and Willis should be in the primes of their career, and they're all kind of out of baseball. So we have to make sure that we follow a model that is proven long-term to be successful. And when I show you those models later, you're going to be blown away. So one of the other problems that we have is, we talked about conventional wisdom, is I always show this cartoon to coaches. And it's Dennis the Menace. He's in trouble. Parents put him in the corner. And he says, if you're raising me right, how come I get in so much trouble? So I always ask coaches, if we're doing such a great job coaching, why are more kids getting hurt than ever before? Why are more kids quitting the game than ever before? Why, in America's pastime, are more than half the players playing this game professionally from outside of America? And believe me, I love America, the great melting pot. I will defend everyone to come here and set up a great life of freedom. But this is America's game, and we should be doing better. We should absolutely be doing better. No other sport has those types of numbers, where over half of the major and minor leaguers are from outside the country. Even with the influx in European players in basketball, it's a pretty small percentage. So one of the mistakes we make is that we don't practice what we do. And we get a lot of what Tom House called bad information from good sources. In other words, coaches that have a lot of credibility, or players that have successful careers, will give information, and it's not necessarily accurate. It's bad information, but because maybe a coach has been successful, or a player had a great playing career, we tend to believe them. Let me give you an example. Here's a picture from Randy Johnson's book called Power Pitching, and this is Randy talking about the proper release point, demonstrating it. So if you bought this book, you'd be like, hey, well, Randy Johnson, right? This guy's one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He would know, right? The only problem with this is that this is him demonstrating what he thinks is the natural release point. Well, this is his actual release point. So there's a little problem here, right? And actually, even on the cover of my book, The Picture Perfect Pitcher, there it was again, him demonstrating that release, or him with that sidearm release point. And I defy you to find a Randy Johnson picture with him releasing the ball like he is in the top left. He doesn't do it. But let's say we're in a clinic, and Randy Johnson's there, and he says, release the ball here. What's everybody going to do? They're going to release the ball there. Why? Because he's Randy Johnson. He would know. He's one of the greatest pitchers ever lived. But it's just not accurate, unfortunately. It's just not accurate. And it's not information that can be given to the masses, so to speak. So let's get into the mechanics discussion. And another thing we have to get out of the way is this. Mechanics are mechanics. Whether you're 12 years old, 17 years old, 27, 37, or 47, mechanics are mechanics. This is a 12-year-old pitcher to the left, and Roger Clemens, I think he was like 35 at the time, and you see they're in the same position. They've got the same body parts. Now, they may have different strength. Clemens obviously has different strength and is more mature, more developed, but the body parts are the same. The movements for efficient mechanics are the same as well. They do not change just because you are younger. So let me show you a few more examples. Here is Greg Maddux and another Little League World Series pitcher, a 12-year-old pitcher, and probably about 35, 40-year-old Greg Maddux. Here's another one with Maddux. This one's kind of funny because they're almost wearing the same color uniforms. Good mechanics are good mechanics. No, it doesn't matter. But bad mechanics are bad mechanics. Right? So here's Dontre Willis and a 12-year-old pitcher, both with bad mechanics. So the same things that an older pitcher does and the mistakes they make, but the same things can be done on their lower level. It's all the same. It's a huge question I get all the time is can we teach the same things to different pitchers? And when it comes to mechanics, absolutely, you absolutely can do the same things. And I'm going to show you how they're similar. So when we talk, I'm going to geek out a little bit here just for a second, but you might want to watch this a couple times. When we talk about pitching, there's three foundations that you have to understand. There's the kinetic chain. The kinetic chain is that chain of joints and muscles and our skeletal structure that works from the feet to the fingertips in a pitcher. So in other words, when a pitcher's foot hits the ground, his energy system is activated, and power and force come up the body. And that energy runs through the kinetic chain. So it starts with the foot, the ankle, the shin, the knee, the quad, the glute, and all the way on up the body, right? So one body part passes its share of energy to the next body part, okay? And this is why it's important that you have to spend a lot of time with strength and conditioning so that every one of your body parts is secure, strong, and can handle the mechanics that you're asking. That's a different conversation for a different video. But I'm just going to throw that side note in there. The kinetic chain is as strong as its weakest link. And if you have strong legs, weak abs, and strong shoulder, you're not going to get the power from your legs because the abs, it's not going to come through the kinetic chain through your abs. Eventually something will break down. There's laws of inertia. Object in motion stays in motion. Object at rest stays in rest. Equal and opposite reaction, right? We all took 8th grade science. So there's laws of inertia that come into play with the pitching motion. Then there's force continuity. And this is one that we come up with through our research at the 90 Mile Per Hour Club and Pitching DNA. So force continuity states this: wherever you start in the pitching motion, good or bad, you're forced to continue along that path until the activity is finished. So if you start bad, you can't. It's impossible to redirect yourself and correct it. You have to finish that path throughout your pitching motion. So, and if you start good, you have a more likelihood to finish good. Doesn't mean you are, but if you start bad, it's impossible to recorrect once you start. You're forced to finish that motion and continue it until the activity is accomplished. So, the pitching timeline. Every pitching delivery is about 1.4 seconds. Even a fast delivery, say like a Justin Verlander, and a slower delivery, say like Andy Pettitte, they're give or take a tenth of a second here or there, they're about 1.4 seconds. Now, the first second of that delivery is everything that happens up until your foot hits the ground. So lift, stride, posture, and all that stuff. Your foot hits the ground, that's the first second of the delivery. Now, most of the drills and the training that we have focuses on the 0.4 seconds that happen after, and all the other things that happen. There's a lot of things that happen in that very, very small window of time. But I'll tell you this, everything that we define as flaws, and I'll show you that in a second, if you get the first second right, if you get everything that happens up until the time your foot hits the ground right, it's very hard to screw up anything else. It's really, really hard to screw up anything else. So that's why I do all of my instruction based on the first second of the delivery. So if you have a pitching coach that's talking to you about arm angle, release point, head, glove, spine, forget it. Even follow through, forget it. If they're not working with you on the first second of delivery, none of that stuff matters. And I'm going to show you in a second. So one of the analogies I like to use with pitching is that pitching is like a 5-story building. That if you build that foundation the right way, you're more likely to have a good, strong, solid building. And then if you build every other floor with good, solid materials, everything will stay sturdy and stable and will be able to support whatever that building's function is. Now this almost works like the kinetic chain, right? So that you build the foundation, and then you build a good first floor, and then it passes on that share of the ability to stabilize that load onto the second floor, and that can handle that load, and onto the third floor, and so on, all the way up the chain. So that's what happens. The kinetic chain works the same way. And just because you build a great foundation, a good first floor, second floor, third floor, doesn't mean that you won't have a bad beam on the fourth floor. So you could have a muscle pull or a muscle weakness somewhere in your body, just like in a building, and that can be repaired. But it's a lot easier to repair it when you have a good foundation and you're building solid all the way up. Also, too, if you have a bad foundation, we all know what happens to buildings that have bad foundations. Over time, they're going to have a lot of problems, and most times they just need to be torn down and rebuilt if the foundation is not done right. So that's why we focus. The foundation is that first second of the delivery. If we do that right, we can do a lot of great things. So all these flaws, stride length, stride direction, front leg swing, rushing, flying open, inverted W, head falling off, glove pull, arm path, arm action, release point, long arm, short arm, all these flaws that pitching coaches will talk about, I promise you can all be fixed with focusing on the first second of your delivery. And these are mostly things that are caused by a bad first movement. Okay, when we have a bad first movement, these are the things that kind of tend to happen. Okay, let me give you another example. Back to our 5-story building analogy. Okay, let's say we had this, you were going to fix the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Where would you fix it? Would you fix it at the top? Would you just move those top floors? No, everybody I've ever showed this picture to says, I'm going to fix this at the bottom, right? We're going to fix the foundation. What happens when you fix the foundation? Everything else falls in line. Well, working on release point, follow through, arm angle, head, and all that is like working on the top, is like working here in the top 3 floors. But this is like the first second of the delivery. So this is like everything that happens till your foot hits the ground. This is everything that happens after. if we have to fix this, there's no way to fix this building without fixing the foundation. It's just as simple as that. And it's funny how this works with pitching. Check out Dontrelle Willis. You see how his foundation is tilted? So if you look at him here, very interesting, if you look at how his spine and his shin almost match up, because his upper half is just a byproduct, a reflection of what the lower half is doing. This can't be straight up. In his release point, if you kind of move his picture, let me see if I can slant this picture a little bit. But his release point, his elbow to shoulder relationship is the same as if we go back to Randy Johnson. The only problem is that he set up his lower half poorly, and he stepped across his body, which is a lot. We'll talk about it in a little bit, and that's what forces him to fly off. He has a poor setup in his first second, and that's what's causing all of these problems. And I promise you, if we had a room full of pitching coaches, they'd argue and point out every single flaw, where all I would say is he screwed up the first second of his delivery. And that's what caused this, all right? So let's get into actually looking at examples of good mechanics. So the first thing that we talk about is the power angle. Now this is probably the most controversial thing that we've ever researched, and we initially got the idea out of the Dado Baseball Institute, and we backed it up with our own research at Pitching DNA. The best pitchers in baseball at the top of their lift are moving towards home plate and are not in what we call a traditional balance point. Okay, so if you look at Pedro, Maddox, Clemens, Johnson, you're talking about 4 first ballot Hall of Famers. Well, maybe not Clemens, but that's another video too. You're looking at guys that were the best in baseball for a long time, 20 years. And they're all moving towards home plate at the top of their lift, right? They're not coming into a stop at the top, get balanced over the river, get collected, like Bonderman, Pryor, and Strasburg are at the bottom. Now, Bonderman and Pryor should be in the primes of their career. They should be creeping up near, they should be near 200 wins now. 175, 200 wins now. Now, Strasburg, it's too early to tell, but I've always asked people, do you think you see Strasburg pitching 10, 15 years from now? And nobody's ever said yes to that. He's not going to be a Maddox, a Clemens, Johnson, or Pedro type. So as you see, what happens here now, so this is where the 1.4 seconds comes in. So if you look at the top row, they're all moving towards home plate, right? They're on time, so to speak. If you look at the bottom row, they haven't moved an inch, right? Now we go back to laws of inertia. Object at rest stays at rest. So they move back. When they lift, you see how they're all turned away from home plate? So when you lift and turn away from home plate, you have energy going back into the right. Now that has to stop and get redirected forward and to the left. But the problem is back into the right and forward to the left are not moving towards home plate. So that's a big problem. Right? And you're going to see how this is forced continuity. Right now, they set that bad path. And you're going to see how that multiplies and ripples throughout the delivery. But I want to show you a few more just to kind of cement this power angle argument in. I showed you Pedro and Maddox. Here's Gaylord Perry, Hall of Famer. You see him moving towards home plate. Dennis Eckersley, you see him moving towards home plate. Whitey Ford, Carlton, and Nolan Ryan early on. You see them all moving towards home plate. Warren Spahn, Phil Niekro, excuse me. Raleigh Fingers, or that might be, that's Raleigh Fingers, all moving towards home plate. You see that power angle in all of them, even Spahn with his crazy delivery. Tom Seaver, you see him. Catfish, you see him moving forward. Jim Palmer, look how far Gibson is moving towards home plate. So the power angle is essential. And if you want like full explanation, you can get the 90mphM Club system and take you through all of that. So now the next part of this is posture. So they take the power angle and they start moving towards home plate. Okay, so if you see Maddox, Clemens, and Johnson, look how far they're moving towards home plate around the time their hands get separated. Now I tried to find pitchers that were in the similar position as pictures of the 3 guys on the bottom in a similar position. They're not exactly identical, but look at Look at the difference between Clemens and Pryor. Look how much further in the same, almost the same hand situation, the same separation of the hands. Look how like just passive Pryor is. Doesn't even look like he's moving. Where Clemens is moving towards home plate, he's kind of moving very slow. Even Bonderman, you see that they're kind of falling behind. So in the posture phase is that whatever your spine is doing, you want to maintain that spine as you move into front foot strike. Okay, and you can see these guys are just falling behind a little bit. They're just not in the same position. So that's number two. The next phase of it is elbows. So now this is a really telling point about timing. Okay, so we're still about that first second of the delivery. So what happens is the arms create an equal setting. So I use the example of a bicycle. Let's say you had your bicycle and you're holding the handlebars and you're running alongside the bike, right? And you go and push the bike. If the handlebars stay straight, that bike will continue to roll and it will go straight. You'll put energy into that bike. Just like when your front foot hits the ground here, you'll put energy into that front foot. So let's say now you're running alongside your bike again, and then right as you put energy into it, you tilt your handlebars. What happens to the bike? It's going to go over right away. Same thing happens here. This is the body balancing as you're going into foot strike. So the body knows this is just like walking a tightrope. Okay? Look how aggressive Johnson is. Look at his hair here in this picture. So now look at it. The same pictures on the lower half. See how their spines are all tilted kind of back? And look how they're all kind of looking way over their left shoulder. Where you look at Clemens, Maddox, and Johnson, they're so much more dynamic. Their spines are even. Their spines are between their feet. They're moving aggressively towards home plate. Look at the heels on all of these guys. Their feet are all up because they have this kind of arc that's coming back. Now that all started back here because now they turn back and to the right. Now they're spinning open, and now they're rotating here, and they're still not putting their foot on the ground. Where you see these guys, their foot's just about to hit the ground. And look at the difference between the height off the ground that these guys have. Now, next phase, after the front foot hits the ground, here's where you see the real demonstration of just how screwed up those guys on the bottom are. So your front foot hits the ground, your knee will continue to bend and track. Now that's if you set up a good power angle, good posture, and you set your elbows. Oh, actually, let me go back here. One of the things you should never do on the back side here is ever mess with arm angle. Okay? So I guarantee if a 12-year-old kid showed up with this arm angle, and this arm angle, they would all be telling them to point the ball at second base. Let the arm, see these guys are doing is they're matching up their front side with their back side. They're creating a balance here. Okay? They're not changing the arm. Never, ever change the arm. So after you got a good power angle, good posture, and you set your elbows, and now your front foot hits the ground, your knee will continue to bend towards home plate, bringing you closer to home plate, which is a visual velocity, makes your ball look harder because you'll be throwing a shorter distance. Hitter will have less time to react. Now your hips start to turn, and so right now in the kinetic chain, the energy is all up here. The energy is all up here. And the reason why is the hips are turning and the elbows are kind of pinched behind, the scap pinched behind, and that's preparing the body to throw. Okay, the shoulders are getting ready for all that energy that's coming up. The energy is all right here. There's nothing going on in the arm here now, right? So the shoulders are pinched back to prepare for that. Look where their feet are. Now look down here. You see these guys pinching their shoulders? They're getting ready to throw. Their shoulders are preparing to throw. But what's the problem? They haven't loaded their energy system yet. They're not even on the ground. So you see where the timeline comes into effect here? None of those guys are even close to being on the ground. And they're starting to throw. So what in essence, they've kind of cut their body out of the equation, and they're not going to get full use out of the power of their body like these guys did, because they did things in the proper order. These guys are so out of order. Why? Because all the way back here, they got behind. See how it trickles? they got behind with that first movement. So now everything becomes rushing, right? So in the past, people would call this rushing, right? Oh, you're rushing too far, get balanced. But now these balance point burned a lot of time. Now what happens? Now these guys are rushing to throw before their foot hits the ground. So actually, the thing that we're doing to avoid rushing actually causes rushing. Okay? First movement towards home plate is aggressive movement towards home plate. Then you see where these guys are. You see how stacked they are. Toe is open. Now the toe was not open when they landed. If you look back here, their toe was kind of closed as they were landing. And then the toe opens when the hips turn. Okay, so don't land with your toe open. You see how stacked these guys are, head right over belly button. And different arm angles. A high 3/4, a little bit higher, side arm. And go back to Randy Johnson's another release point. And look where these guys are. Heads are flying off. Their knees aren't bent like these guys are. See how much closer these guys are getting to home plate? And these guys just, it's just not happening for these guys. It's just a mess. But this is the byproduct. This is this is the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It all started way back at the beginning of the delivery. And if you notice, a blocked off front glove. So we always talked about a blocked off front side glove. And that's what you see here. You don't see any pulling of the glove or the glove outside of the hips and shoulders like you would see here and you would see here. Prior is not the worst case, but if you take into consideration that prior is thrown to home plate, this is not a straight on shot like some of these are. Prior is thrown to home plate's kind of moving in this direction here because you can see where his foot is and where his arm is. So that's why these guys are paying the price. They got way behind right here. So if you start this right, the rest of this stuff tends to go right as well. So my advice to you in closing this is you get the first second of your mechanics right. If you get the first second of your mechanics right, the rest of your mechanics is really hard to mess up. And that's what we're talking about here, getting the power angle, setting your posture. So if you do the power angle right, your posture will probably be right. Good chance of it being right. High success rate. The elbows, never mess with the throwing arm. Match up the angle of the throwing arm with the angle of the front arm. Right? Now, just as a side note, these guys are all getting into that, but they're getting into it way too out of sync. See the difference? These guys are getting into equal and opposite. They're just getting into it way out of sync. Okay? If you set up all this right, hip shoulder separation, torque, scap load, all that stuff, it just happens. It can't not happen. If you do all that right, you'll have your glove will stay in that box. It won't pull. It won't cost you velocity. Your release point will be consistent. It will give you the best chance you can for increased performance and reduced injuries. So I would love for you guys, if you want to dig deeper into how to train for pitchers, that you check out the 90mphMechanics Club. And we have a full course there that can help you out. And you can go to Paul Reddick Baseball VIP. Paul Reddick Baseball VIP. In fact, I'll write it out just in case we need to. You can't hear me correctly. It's Paul Reddick Baseball VIP, and you can get our 90mphMechanics Club Core, Complete, or Elite courses, and all the other courses that we have in our catalog that I know will help you. So thank you so much for your attention and your interest, and I hope you got a lot out of this. And watch this a couple times, and I think it'll really help you out and get you well on your way to throwing with 90mphMechanics. Thanks.